How's everyone doing today? Hello. So, today I figured that I'd speak a little bit about food, diet, and maybe some issue. Talk about climate change a little bit. In particular, climate change as it relates or in comparison to artificial intelligence. So, first, let's talk a little bit about food. Food is one of my favorite subjects. Um, it's not because I'm a foodie, although I do enjoy food. I wouldn't necessarily call myself a foodie. A foodie is someone who really relishes in food, which I do, of course. But I think um, the way I relish in food is, well, I don't know. It's very controlled, mostly. So I wanted to relate a fun experience I had over the last few days. So I am attempting, I'm basically in weight management right now. I'm just managing my weight as it is. I've reached my target weight. So I'm really just I'm just coasting right now as it relates to managing my weight. Um, though last Friday, um, I had there was just I don't know what came over me. I was just inspired to eat more than I usually do, quite a bit more, and um, it wasn't a problem. Certainly, not at all. In fact, I really just overate a lot of fruit that I happen to already have in my own home, and I never left my home to get more or anything like that. And it was really enjoyable. I had basically a feast of oranges and apples and all kinds of fruit that I had available at the time. And it was a really pleasant experience. And but though yet I overate, I ate more food than I would normally eat. Um, that was not a problem or an issue. I was able to go for a little walk afterwards, hopped on the bicycle, and by the end of the day, in that evening, I felt really good about how I had managed things. So it was actually a success story. How many people can say that after a day of overeating? So I felt really good at the end of the day. Um, the very next day, Saturday, I felt even better in the sense that I wasn't very hungry at all. And so naturally, I didn't feel very hungry because I had eaten a lot the prior day. And clearly, my stomach was recognizing that. And I just didn't feel hungry. I was able to eat. I still ate my allotted amount that I usually eat normally. And so Saturday was not a problem, not an issue. It was very relaxing. The problem arose the very next day, Sunday, when I think my stomach, which I imagine has a mind of its own, started thinking, "Hey, I haven't eaten. Last Friday I ate a lot of food, and today I'm having relatively little. And so what's about that?" and and so I was feeling really hungry on Sunday. Throughout the entire day, really. Starting in the morning, I was just hungry. Even though I was eating my standard allotment of food, um, I was just feeling hungry. I was eating my meals early, probably about an hour to 2 hours, even 3 hours earlier than I normally eat the food because I was just really drawn to it. And now, I'm also glad to say that at the end of that day, I still ate my allotted amount of food. It took a lot of self control and determination to make sure that I ate my standard allotment of food, but I did. So I was quite successful. And at the end of the day, I felt really satisfied. Though I think generally I was hungry even into the evening. but I still didn't overeat on that day. So even though I felt compelled to because of hunger, it just got me to think about the stomach, or at least the interest, the appetite, and how it changes and how it can fluctuate, and how with every sort of there's a balance in um, in that when you overeat one day, don't think that it will not have consequences because in my experience, especially when it comes to food, there are always consequences. And that was for sure in my imagine how I imagine things. That's what happened to me. And it's not that I ate. It's not that there was a problem in any respect. It's just there was some tumult, particularly on Sunday. I was definitely hungry throughout the day. I don't care to have that kind of instability in my appetite. I prefer to have regular appetite, standard feelings of hunger and satiety throughout my day, predictable and understandable. And when things get out of whack, like they did last weekend, I notice. I stand up and notice. My ears perk up. And in this case, yeah, I realized that there was a consequence to my overeating on Friday. And the consequence was feelings of hunger on Sunday, not on Saturday, not the next day. I was feeling very content on Saturday. I was definitely not content on Sunday. And so, what does that mean? Well, there's something to say about constancy if you want an appetite control that is regular and routine and non problematic. I think it's important to sort of be disciplined in that respect, so at least for me, I mean, I'm not the kind of a person who really appreciates hunger pangs and hunger feelings. I don't care for it. That's quite undesirable, uh, and especially when I have to call on my self discipline as it relates to food. It takes a lot of mental energy, and sometimes I fail in my discipline. In fact, it happens quite a lot um, when it comes to overeating um, when I don't intend to. And so, to make sure that that's limited as much as possible, I do try to eat about the same amount of food every single day. And I definitely feel the consequences when I don't, when I tend to indulge. So, in fact, I'm really developing this awareness now of sort of sort of knowing, sort of pre-knowing, sort of this premonition about, you know, oh, I would love to eat this extra sandwich, or I'd love to eat this extra portion or helping. It's available. That's typically what gets me. It's like my eyes are larger than my stomach. But usually what happens is my eyes are large and my stomach just accepts. And I think there's something to that as well. I think there's a survival advantage to having a stomach that accepts change and variability. I think that's very adaptive. Uh, my thinking goes back to ancient people, ancient cultures who lived tens of thousands of years ago, and they perhaps were walking along the savannah and they came across, maybe unexpectedly, um, an animal that had been killed by other animals, and they, as human beings, it was very adaptive just to be willing to scavenge. And if you happen upon some amazing availability, go for it. And I can see how that would be very adaptive. Now today, in contrast, those traits are actually not adaptive. It's funny how traits adaptive in the past today are not adaptive, and it can get people into a lot of trouble. And the fact is, my body, this amalgamation of cells and DNA, it's still the same body that lived 30,000 years ago. And even 200,000 years ago, it's basically the same. And so the appetites and the controls are the same. And so over the millennia, these traits have been honed uh, in my body, where I'm just, if I see food, I can eat it. That's why buffets are so dangerous. And that is also quite true. It also relates to the food that I have in my kitchen. If I have, like, say, problematic food in my kitchen, that's the food that I should not be entertaining eating, that's a problem, because if I see it, I will I will more than likely go after it. And so I try to make my kitchen like a sacred temple. And because if I wanted something special, so to speak, I'd actually have to leave my house. And sometimes that extra energy, that extra effort that it takes to go purchase some special dessert food, uh, I might not have time for it because I've got better things to do. And so, yeah, I uh, I try to make sure that my kitchen is in a way a sacred place, and that I only eat from my kitchen. And also, trips to the grocery store in a way are sacred, in the sense that I try to purchase as much as possible only foods that are on the green list, right? Because if I do purchase any yellow light food or red light food, there's a very good chance I'll eat the whole thing. It's just those traits that were so useful tens of thousands of years ago just aren't useful now. And yeah, it's just how the cultural food landscape, the food culture landscape has changed so much. It comes as a result of affluence, right, and wealth. People today are infinitely wealthy compared to people from 1,000 years ago. In a lot of respects, in the certain respects, we've got medical care and access to information, and we also have access to food. Um, Take anyone from the past, especially from the distant past, and introduce them to a modern supermarket, and I'll guarantee you they'll be doing backflips, celebrating, celebrating their fortune, because it would be as if I were to sort of introduce to them a mountain of gold. Absolutely. So that's why we're just so fortunate today to live in our current food environment, and at the same time, our our genetic traits for our personality make it a dangerous food environment to live in. So yeah, yeah. Anyway, I wanted to talk about that because I just thought it was really interesting. This whole idea about there are consequences to actions as it relates to food, and to some extent, I have less control over certain aspects of my behavior, just given the fact that um, you know my body is created, was generated by ancient DNA, antediluvian DNA, and there's little I can do about it. Yeah, in a lot of respects. So first of all, I do try to eat whole food as much as I can, and I that is an accurate characterization of the situation. I really do try to eat whole foods, and I'm largely successful. I would say that when it comes to being a whole food eater, I'm easily 90% successful in eating whole foods during my day, which um, the only reason I can do that is because I've sort of been at working out this process for many decades. whole decades and decades of refinement, understanding, learning, growth as it relates to food. And great. I'm grateful that food is one of my favorite subjects to talk about. And so it's basically led to me being able to successfully build a whole foods diet for myself. Um, I'm excited about it. I get excited about broccoli, cabbage, and cauliflower, squash. These are the good things in life, and so I'm really grateful to really have this ability that I've created. Now, when I say 90% whole foods, you may think that I'm exaggerating, but and when I reflect on it, that's pretty accurate. And I mean about 90% by weight. Now, by caloric content, the proportion is even higher. I would say it's like 98, even 99% whole food, which is pretty remarkable. This has been going on for a few months now. Um, so, yeah, I've just been on a real whole food kick lately. Now, that this is a relatively recent phenomenon. In the past, I've had variations of whole food percentage, from like 50% to 30%, and, quite variable in between those ranges, between 30 and 50%. And then there was one time just a few months ago, I just really went for it. And I went from like a 50% or even 70%, all the way up to 90% whole food. And now, here, what's the funny thing is, I can't necessarily point to any like health improvements that are obvious as a result. I've been happier about the things that I eat because I feel satisfied that I'm avoiding processed food as much as I can. So I'm grateful for that. And I feel a lot of personal happiness when I contemplate all the efforts that I've made in the last couple months in sort of refining that number and making it as high as possible. I'm really grateful that I have the ability, my circumstances such that I can pull that off. A lot of people just can't do it. I know they're they're in families and they've got children, or they've got partners or mates that make it tough, or they've got lifestyles. Maybe they travel a lot, you know, and I totally understand it. I totally understand it. I'm so lucky that I get to pack my lunch, pack my dinner, even on weekends. I'll pack my breakfast, lunch, and dinner if I need to, all three meals. And I've got the time to cook whole foods. Not everybody has got that kind of time. And I totally get that. And so, I'm sure people do the best they can with what they have. And I fully respect that. And I know how hard it is. And because I know how hard it is, it's personally rewarding for me to reflect on how well I've done. So, um, anyway, now I do have a few failings. Let me talk about my failings. There's a results. I'm not 100% whole food eater. There are practical limits. Um, and those practical limits have to do with circumstance quite often. Sometimes if I'm away from home or I don't have enough time to plan, I'll break down. And thankfully it doesn't happen that often. It might happen only like once a week. So that is one meal a week, maybe two meals a week. Um, yeah, that's a challenge. There's also another challenge I have. Um, I have a hard time with artificial flavors, particularly artificial sweeteners. We're talking Splenda, we're talking about um, aspartame and um, Ace K and um, sweeteners like that. I wish, first of all, I enjoy Splenda. I enjoy Splenda. I really do. I'm not a big fan of stevia. Um, I know a lot of people who love stevia. It does for me have a kind of a bitter taste, except for the product that Splenda creates. Splenda's got this great, I think it's like a stevia blend. I think they may even blend stevia with Splenda, and that may be part of what I like about it. But the Splenda brand has a nice stevia product, which I enjoy. But then I also like Splenda. Um, Now I try not to use the powdered Splenda. I know that the powdered or the granulated Splenda, they use um, oh, another sweetener. I forget, some glucose, maltodextrin. They use maltodextrin, and in my mind, maltodextrin's glycemic index is just too high, and it's a very processed food stuff. But I try to stay away from maltodextrin if I can. So that's why I try to use the liquid Splenda sweetener, not the granulated. Anyway, um, but it's one of my downfalls. And in fact, the way I consider it is a kind of a trade-off. For me, I I use artificial sweeteners as a sort of like a way to help me manage a very high whole food diet. It's there's a part of me that is like a recreational eater. I can't deny it. There is a part of me that is a recreational eater, and I want to. For some reason, I've bought into this idea that food is to be fun, or at least some food is a carnival. I know that's fully a modern idea. Our ancient ancestors should certainly, I don't think necessarily had, unless they like um, got honey, say. I know for them, maybe berries, wild berries like blueberries or strawberries. Maybe those were the carnival in their day, and maybe honey might be another food stuff that was a carnival like or fun, or maybe salt. Different if they found a salt mine or some source of salts. I mean, I can imagine sort of primitive carnival in their mouths when they were able to find some honey and some salt and really go to town on that. And I I appreciate that. In fact, that's partly how I feel. You know, I'm I must say I do enjoy my artificial sweeteners. So what that means is that I'll have like these lower calorie commercial products in grocery stores, like the 0 calorie Gatorades, right? Gatorade Zero. I might have like a Powerade Zero. Um, I might have. I know those have artificial sweeteners in them. I might have. There's various low calorie, no calorie. I might have some like gum or things like that. Like sugar free gum, right? A sugar free gum has, artificial sweeteners in them. And, it's just, I don't know. I really just really enjoy it. I get a lot of personal pleasure from it. And sometimes I'll add Splenda to like some strawberries out of the freezer or some cherries, some frozen cherries. Man, it really makes a great dessert. And in fact, I also sometimes I'll have like a Splenda product, like a syrup, like a vanilla, low calorie vanilla syrup in my coffee, right? And man, I'll tell you, it really does perk up a cup of coffee. I can have one, two, three decaffeinated coffees with the Splenda syrups in there. Oh man, what a treat! It really is a treat. It lightens my mood, and I generally feel happier as a result. And you know, in many respects, it's a win-win. Although, of course, I, like you, have probably heard the clinical studies rolling in over the last 4, 5, 6 years now. We've known that artificial sweeteners can play havoc in a lot of areas of people's lives, particularly in the microbiome. And I just like you, have seen photographs, like micrographs of bacteria in our gut, sort of struggling in the midst of artificial sweeteners, and yeah, so it's a problem. It's a problem, but it's not that much of a problem right now, based on what we know. But smartly, a lot of people avoid artificial sweeteners. In a way, I wish I could be one of them. I admire those that have the grit and the assertiveness and the self control to do that themselves. I'm just not there yet. I think partly is because partly the reason is because there's the whole world of diet is just all about trade offs. I guess I'm willing to eat artificial sweeteners as a trade off for eating natural sweeteners like honey, um, um, more natural sweeteners like honey, because uh, those natural sweeteners are higher in calories. In fact, quite high in calories. Their calorie density is quite high, and so that's the trade-off. I guess the trade-off is processed sweeteners versus calorie density, and you sort of have to choose your devil, right? You have to sort of choose. Uh, yeah, you have to choose which way you're going to fail. You can fail in terms of well, you don't necessarily have to fail with natural sweeteners so long as you're responsible in their use. I think that's my problem with sweeteners. I have a hard time, especially with natural sweeteners, being responsible and eating like enough, like limiting the amount of natural sugar that I eat, or limiting the amount of honey that I eat. It's a challenge. It's so good. It's so good. I think what these sweeteners do, and they might be either artificial or natural sweeteners. I think what they do is they light up our neurotransmitters, particularly dopamine, and so we see them as being um, there's something compelling about a sweetener. Once we taste it, we're like, our attention is drawn to it, and it doesn't lose our attention. And again, we're talking about these ancient traits, right? That kept us alive as humans, these ancient traits when we were in the presence of sweet foods, or fatty foods, or high caloric foods. These three kinds of foods, the sweet, the fatty, and the high calorie foods, they're just like magnets. They attract us like bees to honey. And yeah, but that having that trait today is can be very concerning. But here's the thing: all humans have it, and that's great if you're marketing sweet fat, high calorie foods. If you're selling sweet fat, high calorie foods, you want to endeavor to make those foods as sweet, fatty, and high calorie as possible, because it'll result in greater profits for you if you're selling them. Well, anyway, um, looks like we're only talking about food. um, I'm going to briefly talk about climate change. and artificial intelligence really quick. I was recently introduced to an interesting question, and that is what what area is more of an existential threat to the human race? Is it artificial intelligence, the threat of artificial intelligence getting out of control, uh, or climate change? And I think my response is that climate change is a real and present danger to humanity. And whereas the threat from artificial intelligence is largely theoretical, at least now, and maybe for at least another couple years, it is still just theoretical. You have to realize at bottom, the AI is just a text chatbot. And AI will only ever have the power that we humans give to it. Um, anyway, I guess that I'll just touch on that tasty question right now, and maybe tomorrow, perhaps, we'll go into that question in a little more depth. Anyway, thank you very much for paying attention, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. Bye bye.